I used to punch holes in the walls. I would lose it with my kids completely, especially when I had three toddlers at once. That was really rough. And my coping skills came by the way of me punching walls, punching doors, punching myself. Um, Obviously, at the time, I didn't really have a lot of coping skills that actually helped. Others didn't help because it did, but that was because those were the only coping skills I had. And honestly, I don't think that I understood honestly how much trauma I really had until I had children, until I had another human being completely dependent on me and feeling like you are responsible for every single thing that happens to this human. And that's really when I realized how much my upbringing has so much impact on how I parented, how I transitioned as a mother, how I transitioned in my marriage, even, and understanding that once I had children, it gave me a completely different perspective that I never even knew was possible with what I had at the time. And for the longest time, I would tell myself, this is just how I am. I am just full of rage, right? And I would identify with that every single time that I would start to feel this kind of like ball of energy. I always explain it as like a ball of energy that really starts in my stomach and then it goes all the way up and up and up into my chest. And then it would almost like burn my chest where I feel like I have to let this out. I have to let this out. And then I would feel it go all the way up to the top of my head. And I know that when it's the top of my head, that's when I'm almost like I have no control over like how my body is responding to that ball of energy that is just so hot and just waiting to come out. And that would be my rage. And to this day, I still have a lot of rage that is inside of me. However, I have learned a lot, I have healed a lot, and I have gone through growth to where I understand where my rage come from. And I ask a lot of probing questions to myself when it comes to feeling these heavy, intense feelings in my body, especially when I'm overstimulated and I am overwhelmed with the day-to-day life of having four kids and a business as well. If you're new here, hi, I'm Janara. I am a mom of four and I'm also a birth and postpartum doula, and I have been a doula for almost 10 years now. I own a catering business serving traditional Filipino food, as well as I am a private chef that also caters to retreats and private events. I am also a founder. I founded a company that focuses on maternal mental health and matrescence. If you've never heard of matrescence and you are a mother, then you absolutely have to understand what matrescence is, because it truly, truly changes the way that you view motherhood and the way that you view your transition from being a woman to being a mother. So back to my rage. My rage, I didn't understand at the time that it had so much more to do with how my brain processes things and how my brain is actually set up and how it interpreted things that were happening to me. I didn't really understand it. So for years, I was a chronic yeller, and it was a way for me to express how I was feeling at the time, to express how I was feeling, how I was almost conceiving everything that is in front of me. And for years, when my kids were little, for context, my first three kids, I had them all in 5 years. So by the time my first one was 5 years old, I've already had all three of them. And I used to laugh because I used to tell my friends, I used to be like, the math is just not mathing, because how do I have three kids and the first one is only 5? I'm like, how does that even compute? But here we are. I do have 4 kids, and my fourth one is 2.5. So I had him when my youngest one was 4. Funny story about that is the same month that I found out I was pregnant with my fourth one was the same month that I weaned my third baby from breastfeeding, and he was 3.5 at the time. So Mother Nature, I see you. I see you trying to be funny, but it's all good. Now I have 4 kids, and they are ages 10, 8, 6, and 4. Another thing that I was really, I know it's going to sound super, I don't know, maybe weird, maybe quirky, whatever. But when I found out that I was pregnant with my fourth one, I had not almost, I had a whole breakdown. I remember telling my super close mom friends that I was like, oh my God, like I have this thing. I have to tell you guys, and I haven't even told my husband. And I remember one of my friends looking at me and being like, Janara, are you serious? Hi, Erin, it's you. She was looking at me and she was like, you've got to be crazy to think that you're going to have another kid. Like, you are barely surviving the 3 right now. And I just remember crying, and I just remember being so distraught, just being like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, it's here. And then I didn't know if I was to tell my husband. At the end of the day, obviously I knew that it was a decision that I was ready to make. Whatever decision that was, it didn't take me long to make a decision because as a mom of 3 at the time, I mean, like a mom of multiples, you got to make quick decisions, and sometimes that sounds really bad. But in a way that I'm saying is that I sometimes I don't leave any room for me to negotiate with myself. Because when I leave room to negotiate with myself, a whole lot of times it has put me in a place where I overthink things. And so it was one of those things where I weighed in the options, and I really asked myself probing questions to understand like how I felt about the situation, and seeing what kind of decisions do I make from that. And obviously, at the end of the day, I told my husband we decided to follow through with having our baby, and it was a big decision. However, it I think that months later is when I realized, well, let me start over. I think that at some point I did make a decision that I am going to follow through with having my fourth baby. And oh, also another context is that at the time I was also an overnight postpartum doula, which meant that my work hours were absolutely crazy. I was starting work from 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and I don't get home till 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. So a lot of the times my sleep was just fragmented. Not that it wasn't fragmented before because I was breastfeeding, but sleep has always been something that has been very fragmented for me. Obviously, having 4 kids, I mean, it does that to you. And then my work being a postpartum overnight doula obviously also added into that. So it was really a tough decision to make. And I think that at the time, I knew that I did want another baby, but it was also the decision of having that baby and understanding how heavy that decision was because of the fact that we already had 3. So it was, looking back now, it was definitely really tough, but obviously super happy with the decision that we made. And also for the fact that my last baby was the most amazing birth I've ever had. I had him at home, I had a home birth, and I had a doula with me and my husband. However, I did make a rule that I wanted them to do everything around me and not anything with me. So I put my headphones in, and I probably labored for maybe close to 3 hours. And next thing you know, baby was out. And it was the most amazing, most euphoric, most, I don't know, like I just felt so high from the experience that I feel like I could never recreate that feeling again. Going back to my rage, I grew up in a household where rage was the common language. I grew up with a single dad, and it was just my brother and I. And life was very tumultuous, to put it lightly. I grew up in the Philippines. I was born and raised there. I left the Philippines when I was 15 years old. No, 14 going on 15. And my dad was a very, very strict man when it comes to how we should act and how we should present ourselves and how we speak and how we move through the world. So I grew up in a household where every move was calculated and every move was controlled. So when I started having children, I think one of the biggest hurdle that I had and triggers really was the fact that it was so hard to contain everything all at once, because when you grow up in an environment where everything is controlled and everything has to be a certain way, you almost expect that to happen or to mirror that in your own home. And obviously, down the line, I realized how much of my life with children was not something that I could control. And it was a lot of lowering my expectations. And really, at that time, I didn't even know that I had these expectations that were set by the people who raised me, by the environment that I was raised in. And honestly, motherhood is a lot of expectations and guilt and shame that didn't come from us, that came from somewhere else, came from other people, came from people's voices, came from our environment, things that happened to us that have become part of our identity. And a lot of mothers struggle in their first year of being mothers because they don't realize how much these expectations and guilt and shame and voices that are not ours, but they're very loud when you are overwhelmed, when your nervous system is in a state where you are so stressed, you're so overwhelmed, your body doesn't even know how to come back to itself, to even understand that your reality is so hard because of the fact that you have all of these pre-made expectations and guilt and shame and voices that didn't even come from you. And then on top of that, you have social media who tells you that being a mother is all these rainbows and sprinkles and unicorns and magic and joy, that you're supposed to feel this instant joy and instant love. And when you don't, it makes you feel like a bad mother, because how come the next person can and I can't? But the truth is that being a mother is so much more than just one way of seeing it and one way of transforming and one way of connecting. I have had plenty of clients as a doula where what one of their main concern, especially in the first 2 weeks, is that they feel like they don't know how to connect with their baby. So let me go back to my upbringing. So I was raised by a very strict dad, and when I was growing up, I was not allowed to play. You're probably thinking to yourself, like, well, what do you mean you're not allowed to play? You're a kid. Well, my dad felt that I was only to do the things that would benefit me. And at the time, obviously, he felt that play was a waste of time. And so I remember vividly there was one time that I was caught playing, and my dad made me run back and forth in the dirt until I was literally crawling on the ground. And he was like, hey, you wanted to play? So go ahead, go play, go run back and forth and, see where that takes you. And I just remember gripping the soil, gripping the dirt on the ground, and my knees aching from the little rocks in the dirt that I've been kneeling on the whole time, because at this point I was crawling. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, whatever this is, like, whatever I did to make this happen, like I'm gonna do it again. I know you're probably thinking like, what do you mean? I think that since I was a kid, I've always had this idea that whatever it is that somebody tells me I cannot do, I will do it in spite of what they were saying I cannot do. And that's always been my mindset. And I think that that's another reason why my dad was so hard on me, because he had a really hard time kind of molding me to the person that he wanted to mold me to, because I was just not moldable. Like, in a way, I was. Obviously, I was the perfect child. I was the um I was the child that got all the grades. I was the child that had good manners when it comes to dealing with other adults and things like that. And obviously, I knew when to act up and when not to act up. I was just always told that I was so mature when I was a kid, and that was because I did also mask a lot. I was a chronic people pleaser because that's what kept me safe. I knew that if I would just do the things that I was supposed to do, I knew that I was going to be safe. But also, the other side of that is that I was also a kid who had this very vivid imagination of like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and like, who's going to stop me, and like, why is there somebody stopping me? And so I remember being in this brand new school. I just moved to the province with my dad, and I remember going to this school, and it was a Christian school, and I came from a Catholic school. And I remember we had these very strict like uniforms that we had to wear. But during lunchtime, like, it's kind of like whatever you do, whatever, right? So it was lunchtime, and I figured, well, it's lunchtime, it's time to play. So here I am. I took all my fancy uniform off because it was like a white polo shirt. And I was like, I'm not gonna about to get that dirty because I'm gonna be the one washing it. So I took it off, and I had like a tank top under. And then my skirt I also took off, and I had shorts under. So I was just in a tank top and shorts. And I was probably like maybe 8 years old. And I just remember me and these three boys were running around like playing tag. And the next thing I know, I just see this like figure from afar, and I just knew it was my dad because I know how he walks, I know how he stands. That's another thing that I'm gonna go back to later on, how I learned to recognize those things, footsteps, like his figure, everything. Anyway, so I just see this figure coming at me, and I just knew, I was like, oh crap, like I'm in deep trouble. And I just remember him grabbing me by like the top of my head and just dragging me by my hair out of that school all the way out the gate. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, how embarrassing that like he had to drag me, and then I'll like tomorrow I'm gonna have to come back and like face everybody and see and be like, oh yeah, that was me. Like, it's normal. And I just remembered asking myself, like, what is it? What is it about play that I am not allowed to do? Like, it's something that I craved, because obviously you're a kid, like you just want to play. That's how you learn. That's how you find out about the world, is through play. So it's very important for me now that my kids, I encourage them to play, especially imaginative play and pretend play, because those were the kind of things that I didn't really get to do a whole lot as a kid. Like, I would do them when especially when I was with my mom. When I was with my mom, it was like the complete opposite. Like, I was allowed to do whatever I want. Sometimes I wouldn't even come home until like nighttime. And it's the people who would patrol the neighborhood, they would bring me back home. And because my family there, my mom's side, were pretty known in the town, they would just bring me back and be like, hey, it's curfew time, like you can't be out anymore. But my mom, she was pretty much the opposite of my dad. Like, she would just be like, okay, as long as you stay safe and you don't do anything that I wouldn't do, then you go off and do whatever you want. So we would like play in the creek, we would play in like the little makeshift jungle that we have. And then we would, I mean, like, I feel like we would even walk to the next town and like get candy or popsicles or whatever if somebody has money. But I just remembered being so free and being able to do whatever I wanted, but at the same time having that like gut feeling of like, okay, but like making sure that you're also safe, because I was more worried about what my dad would think, or like how he would react to the fact that I was there doing whatever I want, and pretty much like going wherever I want, that I know it would completely just freak him out, and I didn't want my mom to be in trouble. So it was a lot of those. And obviously, as an adult now, I realize how much I was parentified when I was a kid. But I think that being Filipino, I think every single one of us were parentified in some way because it's part of our culture to do that. And now, as a mom of four, I can't even begin to imagine the things that I went through and the things that I thought about when I was a kid, and being really, I guess, in a lot of ways, I was also emotionally neglected and physically neglected also at some point. Physically neglected in a way that I was, hold on, give me a minute. I remember my friends' families, especially their moms, would say, um, I mean, I would be like within like earshot, and they would try to like whisper as much as they can, but they would say things like, I don't want you playing with her anymore because she's covered in lice and nobody's taking care of her and nobody's taking care of the problem that she has. And so you can't hang out with her because like then you're going to get what she has. And at the time, I didn't really understand the magnitude of what I had. I'm like getting goosebumps right now because it was one of the most traumatic part of my childhood. And it was real, like I think it was the physical sensations as well, because I realized that I am also autistic and I have ADHD. And I feel like if I would have known the information that I have now, I definitely would have realized more, that I'm definitely on the spectrum. And at the time, the sensations of having lice on my head as a kid was the most excruciating experience. But at the time, I didn't really know or understand how to go about fixing it, because at the time, like, I would fix the minor problems that I had like, my dad was not the type of person I could come to and ask him for a simple problem and he would help me through it. It was more of like, are you dying? Like, if you're not dying, then you need to go ahead and go find something else to do. And so there was a lot of little things that happened that it was just not something that he would help me with. Oh, another example is my period. So when I got my period, I didn't know what was happening to me. I was 11 at the time. I just turned 11. And I remember asking this woman who was living with us at the time, and it was I think the man was my dad's distant cousin, and that is his girlfriend, and they were living in the upstairs part of our house at the time. And by the way, that man also molested me for 3 years, so there's that. um, but I remember asking her after about, like, I don't know, maybe 2 days of like bleeding and like not even understanding like what is going on. And I mentioned it to my dad, and my dad pretty much like lashed out on me, and he said something like, "Oh, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to help you? I'm not a girl. I don't know what that means." And so I knew that it was one of those things that I had to figure out on my own. And so I asked one of my cousins, and she's like an older cousin, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you got your period? Well, show me." Well, of course, like the naive kid that I was, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll show you." Well, it was like a thing because they made it a thing. Like the next day at school, they literally told everybody that I showed them my bloody underwear. And so it was so embarrassing and I was so ashamed. Um, I think that I had so much rage inside of me for what they did. But at the same time, I couldn't really do much about the situation because I had nobody that would like back me up. So I just kind of let it go. And I think the majority of my life, I really did that, where I made myself so small so that I would not bother anybody, or I would not have like people wondering like if I'm okay, because then if they start wondering if I'm okay, then they're gonna start asking my dad, and then my dad is gonna be like, well, why are you telling these people that like you're not okay? Like, what is that, like, how does that look for me as a dad if they're asking you if you're okay? So it was one of those things where since I was a kid, I've already learned these patterns of like keeping myself safe, keeping myself small, keeping myself protected by my own self, and understanding that like there's nobody else there for me but me. And so translating that into motherhood, I mean, when I tell you that I had such a rough time, I think I'm going to end today's yapping session and we'll see you guys tomorrow.